A scouting party discovers a woman in earth-toned robes standing at the edge of a thriving garden in the heart of the dying Whispering Woods, surrounded by three golden-eyed children who bear the unmistakable mark of the Iron Claw bloodline. Nash's breath stops. The woman turns, and he recognizes the face that has haunted 5 years of sleepless nights. Nova, the mate he watched the council strip of her title and banish as Barren. She shouldn't exist here. The Whispering Woods devour the weak. They took 7 of his wolves last winter alone. Yet she stands radiant, healthy, surrounded by children who move with alpha grace. The eldest boy, no more than 4, has Nash's own amber eyes. The barren mate has done the impossible. She survived exile and bore the heirs the council swore she never could. Before we go further, stop scrolling. If this story grabs you, drop a comment right now telling me where you're listening. Don't just lurk. Your engagement literally determines whether stories like this survive or die in the algorithm. 5 seconds. That's all it takes. Now let's get back to Nova. The scouting party found the green glow at dusk, when the Whispering Woods turned from gray to black and the wind carried whispers of names long forgotten. Nash didn't want to investigate. Something about the light felt wrong, felt deliberate. But the deer tracks led directly toward it, and his pack was starving. His beta, Jax, raised his torch. The forest exhaled, warmth, impossible warmth, in a woodland that had been withering for 3 years. And there, in a clearing where dead trees should have stood, was a garden. Vegetables grew in perfect rows. Fruit trees heavy with harvest formed a protective circle. And in the center, working the soil with practiced hands, was a woman in earth-toned robes, her dark hair bound in the traditional braid of a pack matriarch. 3 children played at her feet. Nash's knees buckled. Nova. 5 years. 5 years since the High Council had declared her empty-blooded and marched her to the border of this cursed forest. She should be scattered bones beneath dead leaves. The Whispering Woods had claimed 17 Iron Claw wolves over the decades, good wolves, strong wolves, lost to starvation and madness because nothing, absolutely nothing, grew in this forsaken place. Yet here stood a garden thick with life. His hand moved to the hilt of his blade before he could stop himself. Alpha instinct warred with alpha shame. The smallest child, a girl with Nova's features but eyes like molten gold, looked up. "Mama, there are wolves at the border." Nova didn't flinch, didn't run. She simply straightened, turned, and met Nash's gaze across the clearing. And in her eyes, he saw no fear, only reckoning. The Whispering Woods had devoured the Iron Claw Pack's hope season by season. What had once been a forest teeming with game was now a graveyard of gray bark and bitter wind. The pack's hunting grounds shrank year after year. Prey grew scarce. Children went hungry. The elders spoke in hushed tones of ancestral curses, of bloodlines grown weak, of mates who failed their duty. Nash had watched his people wither for 5 years, each winter worse than the last. The council offered no solutions, only blame. Colt, his most trusted advisor, whispered constantly in his ear, "The pack suffers because you kept a barren mate too long. The land rejects a weak alpha." The famine demanded action, expansion into forbidden territories. So Nash assembled his fastest scouts, Jax, Marcus, and against his better judgment, Colt, and pushed west into the Whispering Woods. They'd been tracking for 3 days, following increasingly strange signs. Deer paths that ended abruptly, bird song where no birds should live, and finally, the impossible green glow filtering through dead branches. Jax had stopped abruptly at the clearing's edge. "Alpha, do you feel that?" Nash did. The air here thrummed with power, ancient, feminine, earth-deep, the kind of magic the council had forbidden generations ago. The kind of magic they'd accused Nova of hiding. "Listen," I know you see where this is going. You know Nash is about to face exactly what he deserves. But here's the thing, this story only continues if you make it continue. The algorithm doesn't care about justice for Nova. It cares about engagement. So here's your choice. Scroll past and let this story die. Or drop a comment, share this, and prove that listeners still give a damn about stories where women who were discarded come back as queens. Nash forced his legs to move forward. Each step toward the garden felt like wading through ice water, his wolf instincts screaming contradictions: protect, retreat, attack, submit. Nova stood perfectly still, a statue carved from earth and resolve, her hands loose at her sides, but her posture radiating the kind of authority that didn't need claws to enforce it. Jax moved to flank him, hand on his blade. "Alpha, this could be a trap." "It's not a trap," Nash said quietly. His eyes never left Nova. "Stand down." Colt pressed closer to Nash's other side, his voice a venomous whisper. "She practices forbidden magic. Look at this place. The council was right to cast her out. We should leave before—" "I said stand down." Nash's alpha command rippled through the words, forcing both wolves into submission. Colt's jaw clenched, but he stepped back. Nova raised one hand, a simple gesture, and the three children immediately moved behind her. The coordination was instant, practiced. These weren't helpless pups. They were trained. Nash. Her voice was exactly as he remembered, low, steady, the kind of voice that could gentle a wounded wolf or command a battlefield. "You're trespassing." The accusation hit him like a physical blow. Trespassing. On land the pack had banished her to, land they'd called a death sentence. He found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "We're hunting. The territories are dying. We tracked deer here, and—" he gestured helplessly at the impossible garden, the fruit-heavy trees, the black soil that smelled rich and alive. "What is this place?" "Sanctuary." Nova's eyes swept over his gaunt frame, over Jax's hollowed cheeks, over the desperation they wore like a second skin. "For those your council deemed worthless." Movement in the trees. Nash's hand went to his blade, but he froze as figures emerged from the shadows. Wolves he recognized. Mara, the Omega who'd been exiled for speaking against the Elders 3 years ago. Old Thorn, the pack historian who'd questioned the council's records and vanished one winter. Kale, the young tracker who'd been cast out for refusing to participate in a blood challenge Colt had orchestrated. 7 wolves in total, all exiles, all very much alive, and all of them looked healthier than anyone left in the Iron Claw pack. "You built this." Nash's words weren't a question. He stared at the garden, at the crude but sturdy shelters woven from living branches, at the communal fire pit where something savory bubbled in a clay pot. "How?" Nova's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "I remembered what the council forgot. The earth doesn't require your permission to give life, Nash. It requires respect, patience, and hands willing to work without demanding dominance in return." Colt laughed, the sound ugly. "Pretty speech for a barren exile playing farmer. You've gathered scraps and called it a kingdom. We came seeking real solutions, not—" "Watch your tongue." Jax's growl surprised everyone, including himself. He was staring at the eldest child, a boy who'd shifted position to better shield his younger sisters. "That's no ordinary pup." The boy met Jax's eyes with unnerving directness. 4 years old at most, but his stance was pure alpha, weight balanced, chin lifted, protecting his pack. And his eyes were molten amber, the exact shade that marked the Iron Claw bloodline going back 7 generations. Nash's heart stopped. "Nova," his voice cracked. "Who—" "You don't get to ask that question." Nova cut him off with surgical precision. "You lost the right to ask me anything 5 years ago when you stood silent and watched them tear the rank markers from my dress, when you let them call me empty-blooded." when you chose the council's lies over your own mate." The words landed like blade strikes. Nash staggered back a step, and this time Jax didn't move to support him. Even his beta looked disgusted. Colt, however, had gone perfectly still, his eyes locked on the boy with an intensity that made Nash's wolf snarl in warning. "Those children," Colt said slowly, "they're none of your concern." Nova's voice dropped to something dangerous. The air around her seemed to thicken, and Nash swore he saw the grass at her feet grow an inch taller. "You've seen what you came to see. There's life in the Whispering Woods. But it's not for you. Not for wolves who bow to corruption and call it law." "We're starving," the confession ripped out of Nash before pride could stop it. "The pack is dying, Nova. The hunting grounds yield nothing. The water runs foul. Children are." His voice broke. "The children are hungry." Something flickered in Nova's eyes. Not forgiveness, not even sympathy, but perhaps a shadow of the healer she'd once been, the woman who'd tended every wounded wolf without question, who'd sung the old songs over the sick and dying. "That," she said softly, "is what happens when you poison the earth for generations and expect it to keep giving. Your council banned the old ways, forbade earth singers, cut down the sacred groves to build monuments to dominance. The land is starving because you starved it first. Then teach us." Nash dropped to one knee, the ultimate submission for an alpha. Behind him, he heard Colt's sharp intake of breath, felt Jax's shock ripple through the pack bond. "I'm begging you, not for me, for the innocents, for the pups who had no part in—" "Don't you dare." Nova's composure shattered. "Don't you dare use children as shields now. Where was this nobility when the council declared me worthless because I hadn't produced an heir in 2 years? Where was your begging when they said a barren mate was bad luck, a curse, a stain on your precious bloodline?" The little girl behind her, no more than 3 years old, tugged on Nova's robe. "Mama, your hands are glowing." Nova looked down. Her palms were indeed luminous with soft green light, the same light that pulsed through the roots of every plant in the garden. She closed her eyes, breathed deep, and the glow faded. When she opened them again, they held something worse than anger. Pity. "Go back to your dying lands, Nash. Tell the council that the barren mate they threw away is thriving. Tell them she found the ancient birthing grounds they spent centuries searching for. Tell them she did it alone, with exiles and outcasts, while their precious laws strangled the pack from within." She turned away, gathering her children with gentle hands. "And tell them if they ever come here, seeking what they don't deserve, the earth itself will rise against them. Nova, please." She didn't look back. "Mara, escort them to the border. Make sure they understand it's the last time they cross it without invitation." The scarred Omega stepped forward, sympathy and steel in equal measure on her face. "This way, Alpha, before she changes her mind about letting you leave at all." Nash rose on numb legs. His eyes stayed locked on the boy, on his son. He knew with absolute certainty until Nova disappeared into a shelter and the child followed. Jax gripped his shoulder. "Alpha, we need to move." But it was Colt's whisper that followed Nash into the dark woods, cold and calculated. "She lied about being barren. The council will need to know she deliberately deceived them. This changes everything." Nash barely heard him. His mind replayed one terrible loop: the boy's amber eyes, Nova's glowing hands, the garden that shouldn't exist, the mate he'd betrayed standing proud and powerful while his pack crumbled to dust. He'd been so certain the council was right. He'd been so certain. The Whispering Woods swallowed them whole as Mara led them back to dead ground, and Nash understood with perfect, devastating clarity that he'd just walked away from the only thing that could save them. Again. The journey back to Ironclaw territory took 3 days. 3 days of eating dried rations that tasted like ash. 3 days of Colt's pointed silence and Jax's carefully neutral questions. 3 days of Nash replaying every moment in that garden until the memories drew blood. He called an emergency council meeting the morning they returned. The stone hall felt smaller than he remembered, the air stale and heavy with old incense and older lies. The 5 elders sat in their carved seats, draped in ceremonial furs that seemed too large for their withering frames. At their center, in the seat reserved for the Alpha's closest advisor, Colt arranged his notes with meticulous care. Elder Frost spoke first, her voice brittle as winter branches. "You return empty-handed, Alpha. The scouts reported no game, no new territory, only wild tales of gardens in cursed woods." "Not wild." Nash stood before them, every muscle locked rigid. "True." The room went silent. Elder Thorn leaned forward, milky eyes narrowing. "Explain yourself." So Nash did. He described the clearing, the impossible fertility, the exiles living in health and abundance. He described Nova, radiant and powerful, commanding earth magic the council had spent generations trying to erase. He watched their faces pale with each detail, watched Colt's expression remain carefully neutral. And then he told them about the children. Elder Reed's fist slammed the armrest. "Impossible." The physicians confirmed her condition. Empty-blooded. 5 different healers examined her. The tests don't lie. Then the tests were manipulated. Nash's voice cut through the protest. "Because I saw my son with my own eyes. 4 years old, amber eyes, iron claw bearing in every movement." "Your son?" Elder Frost's laugh was cruel. "Or some exile's bastard she's training to mimic our bloodline. You saw what you wanted to see, Nash. Grief makes fools of even alphas." Jack stepped forward from his position against the wall. "I saw him too. And the 2 younger ones. All 3 carry the markers. This isn't desperation speaking. This is truth." Colt rose smoothly, his voice measured and reasonable. "With respect, Beta Jax, we must consider what such a claim would mean. If Nova bore children after exile, children she deliberately hid from her mate and pack, she committed treason. She allowed us to believe a lie, allowed the Alpha to suffer. She committed nothing." The words exploded from Nash. "If those are my children, and they are, then someone prevented their conception while she lived here. Someone poisoned the tests, the examinations, the physicians' reports. Someone wanted her gone." The silence that followed was absolute. Elder Thorn's fingers drummed his armrest. "Dangerous accusations, Alpha. You're suggesting conspiracy within our own halls, a betrayal of sacred trust." "I'm suggesting we've been blind." Nash turned to face each elder in turn. "The lands die. The pack starves. We exile our strongest wolves for questioning traditions that strangle us. And meanwhile, the mate we threw away builds paradise from nothing." His voice dropped to something savage. "Tell me what that suggests about our sacred laws." Colt's mask finally cracked. Just for a moment, Nash saw something flicker beneath the careful composure calculation. Maybe fear. This is exactly the kind of emotional reasoning the Council protects against. Nova practiced forbidden magic. She cavorts with exiles. She's clearly manipulated you with... She saved them. Jax's interruption was quiet but absolute. The wolves we threw away, the ones we called worthless. She gave them purpose and life while we sat in this hall and debated which laws to sharpen next. Elder Reed stood, robes rustling. "This meeting is over. The Council will review your report, Alpha Nash. But we will not entertain wild theories or magical thinking. Nova was examined by our best healers, including Healer Willow herself, who has served this pack for..." "Where is Willow?" Nash interrupted. The question hung in the air like smoke. Elder Frost frowned. "She retired to the southern settlements last year. Some illness." "She's in the sanctuary." Jax's voice was flat. I saw her there, among the exiles. The elders erupted in overlapping protests, but Nash heard none of it. His mind raced, connecting points he'd been too loyal, too blind to see before. Willow, the council's head healer, the one who'd overseen Nova's examinations. Willow, who'd always seemed uncomfortable during the proceedings. Willow, who'd vanished shortly after Nova's exile. Willow, who'd been in that garden looking healthier than she had in years. And peaceful, like someone who'd finally confessed. I'm going back. Nash's declaration cut through the chaos. I'm going back to the sanctuary, and I'm bringing Willow before this council. She'll testify to what really happened. Colt's hand landed on his shoulder, gripped tight enough to bruise. That's unwise, Nash. Think about what you're risking. If you're wrong, you'll have broken the exile decree, violated sacred law, destroyed your own authority. Nash shrugged him off. If I'm wrong, I deserve to lose it all. He was halfway to the door when Elder Frost's voice cracked like a whip. And if you're right, if someone did conspire to destroy your mate, to prevent the birth of your heirs, what then, Alpha? What punishment befits such treason? Nash turned back, and for the first time in 5 years, he let them see the wolf beneath the diplomatic mask. Then I'll tear down every law that allowed it to happen. And I'll start with anyone who knew. The walk through Packlands felt like moving through a graveyard. Thin wolves watched from doorways. Children played quiet games with no energy for laughter. The great hall that had once hosted feast after feast stood dark and cold, its fires banked to preserve what little wood remained. This was his legacy. This slow death. Jax caught up to him at the territory's edge. I'm coming with you. No, Nash didn't stop walking. You're staying here. If this goes badly, the pack needs a beta who isn't implicated. With respect, Alpha, that's the stupidest thing you've ever said to me. Jax matched his pace. You're walking into exile territory to confront your mate about children she's hidden for years. You're going to drag a healer back to testify against the council. And you think you're doing this alone? Despite everything, Nash almost smiled. When you put it that way. It gets better. Jax's voice turned grim. Colt volunteered to accompany us, said he wants to ensure proper protocols are followed. Nash stopped walking. No, that's what I said. But he pulled rank, cited council oversight requirements. Technically, he has the right. Technically, Nash tasted the word like poison. Everything Colt does is technically correct, technically lawful, technically within his rights as advisor. You don't trust him. I don't trust anyone who benefits from Nova's exile. Nash resumed walking. And Colt's risen high in 5 years. Very high. Funny how removing the Alpha's mate cleared so many paths. They reached the forest edge as twilight painted the sky violet. The whispering woods loomed before them, ancient and patient. Somewhere in that darkness, Nova tended her garden. Somewhere in that sanctuary, 3 children played children who should have been raised in the Great Hall, learning pack history and combat forms and the weight of their bloodline. Children Nash had never held, never even knew existed. One more thing. Jax's voice was carefully neutral. The boy, the eldest. What are you going to say when you see him again? Nash had no answer. What did you say to a son you'd abandoned before he was born? To an heir you'd allowed the council to erase? The woods exhaled its strange warmth, inviting and ominous. I guess, Nash said quietly. I'll start with the truth. Behind them, hidden in the tree line's shadow, Colt watched them disappear into green light. His hand moved to the vial tucked inside his vest, crushed wolfsbane mixed with moon petal, the same mixture healer Willow had once brewed on his orders. The same mixture that had kept Nova Barren for 2 years. He'd been so careful, so patient, and now it was all unraveling because Nash couldn't let her go. Colt pulled out a small mirror, whispered the activation phrase, and watched his reflection shimmer into the face of Elder Reed. "We have a problem," Colt said. The elder's smile was cold. "Then solve it. Permanently this time." The mirror went dark. Colt tucked it away and followed the Alpha into the woods, his mind already calculating how many ways 3 small children could tragically die in the wilderness. After all, accidents happened all the time in the Whispering Woods. Everyone knew that. They found Willow tending the herb garden at dawn, her weathered hands sorting chamomile from feverfew with the precision of decades of practice. She looked up as Nash approached, and the guilt in her eyes told him everything before she spoke a word. "I wondered when you'd come," she said quietly. Nova emerged from the main shelter, the 3 children trailing behind her like ducklings. She positioned herself between Willow and Nash, protective even now. "You don't get to interrogate my people." "She's not your people. She's a pack healer who fled her post." Nash kept his voice level, but barely. "And I think she knows why." Willow's hands trembled. The chamomile scattered across the ground like scattered bones. "I couldn't stay. Not after what I'd done. Not after watching you grieve for children that should have existed." The world tilted. "What did you do?" Nash's words came out in a whisper. "Colt came to me 3 years into your mating." Willow's voice cracked. "Said the council was concerned about Nova's fertility. Said they needed to be certain before declaring her fit to bear the Alpha's line. He gave me a tonic wolfsbane and moon petal, said it was a fertility test. That if she was truly capable, the herbs wouldn't affect her." Nova's hand found the eldest boy's shoulder, gripping tight. "I put it in her tea every morning for 2 years." Tears streamed down Willow's face. "Every morning I watched her drink poison and smile at me. Trust me. When the council finally declared her barren, I wanted to confess. But Colt said they'd execute me for incompetence. Said the damage was already done." "You lying!" Nash lunged forward, but Jax caught him. Colt stepped out from behind a tree, slow clapping. "Touching confession, Willow. Though you forgot the part where I paid you 300 silver for your cooperation." The clearing erupted. Nash broke from Jax's grip and slammed into Colt, both wolves crashing into the dirt, claws extended, fangs bared. They rolled in a tangle of violence and rage, Nash's hands finding Colt's throat. "You destroyed her," Nash roared. "You destroyed us." Colt's knee drove into Nash's ribs, breaking his grip. "I saved the pack from weakness, from an alpha too blind to see his mate practiced forbidden magic, from children who'd inherit her corruption." He shouldn't have mentioned the children. Nash's wolf surged forward, the shift violent and complete. But before he could tear out Colt's throat, a sound split the air, a howl that turned his blood to ice. The Blightfangs had found them. They came through the trees like a plague, 30 strong, eyes yellow with madness and mouths dripping foam. Rogues who'd given themselves over to the blight sickness, trading sanity for strength. Leading them was Morvac, a massive wolf with fur the color of rot and scars that told stories of survival no pack wolf could match. "Scatter!" Nova's command rang clear. "Mara, get the children to the root cellar. Everyone else, defensive positions." But Colt was already moving, shifting mid-leap toward the smallest child, little Willow, named for the healer who'd failed her mother. His intention was murder clear. Nash intercepted him mid-air. They collided in a explosion of fur and fury, claws raking, teeth snapping. Around them, the sanctuary descended into chaos. Jax led 4 exiles against the Blightfang's right flank. Old Thorn, moving with unexpected grace, took down 2 rogues with his ancient blade techniques. Nova stood at the garden's center, her hands pressed to the earth. "Get down!" she screamed. The ground erupted. Roots burst from the soil like serpents, thick as a man's torso and moving with predatory intelligence. They wrapped around Blightfang legs, dragged rogues into the earth, created barriers that forced the attackers into killing zones where exile wolves waited with teeth and steel. Morvac roared, his massive form crashing through root barriers like they were spider webs. He fixed his yellow eyes on Nova, on the woman whose power sang through the earth itself. Nash saw it happening, saw Colt break from their fight and sprint toward Nova's exposed back, saw Morvac charging from the front, saw his mate, his powerful, magnificent mate, trapped between traitor and monster. He didn't think, didn't calculate, just moved. Nash hit Colt from the side, jaws closing on the traitor's shoulder. The force carried them both into Morvac's path. The Blightfang's claws meant for Nova's throat opened Nash's side instead, ribs cracking, blood spraying hot across dead grass. But it bought Nova 3 seconds. 3 seconds to press deeper into the earth. 3 seconds to whisper the old words the council had forbidden. 3 seconds to wake the forest itself. The ancient trees of the whispering woods remembered when wolves honored the earth instead of dominating it, remembered the songs of earth singers, the old pacts, the sacred balance, and they were angry. Branches descended like the fists of gods, roots erupted with volcanic force. The forest seized every Blightfang simultaneously, dragging them into the earth or crushing them against ancient trunks. Morvac fought, his strength immense, but Nova's magic wrapped around him like chains of living wood. "This is sanctuary," Nova said, her voice resonating with power older than the pack itself. "And you are not welcome." The forest swallowed Morvac whole. Silence fell, broken only by labored breathing and the whisper of leaves. Colt lay pinned beneath a root as thick as his chest, eyes wide with terror. The Blightfangs were gone, absorbed into the earth that would slowly, inevitably, reclaim them. Nash tried to stand and couldn't. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and spreading. Nova was at his side instantly, her glowing hands pressed to his wounds. Don't you dare die now." Their son, Nash Jr., he'd heard Mara call him, knelt beside them, small hand touching his father's face. "Mama can fix anything," the boy said with absolute certainty. And as Nova's earth magic flowed into him, knitting flesh and bone with ancient power, Nash looked into his son's amber eyes and finally understood what he'd thrown away, and what he'd do anything to earn back. They returned to Ironclaw territory at midday, when the sun couldn't hide the truth of what the pack had become. Nash walked beside Nova, not ahead of her. Their 3 children moved between them, flanked by Jax and the sanctuary exiles. Behind them, Colt stumbled in chains, guarded by Old Thorn and Mara. The pack gathered in silence, gaunt faces staring at the impossible. Their barren exile returned, radiant with power, trailed by golden-eyed children who moved like royalty. The elders waited in the great hall, seated in their ceremonial chairs like judges at an execution. Elder Frost's eyes narrowed as Nova entered. "You dare return after breaking exile? After—" "Be silent." Nash's command wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of an alpha who'd finally found his spine. "You will listen, and then you will answer for what you've allowed." He told them everything. Willow's confession, Colt's conspiracy, the poisoned tea that stole 2 years of Nova's fertility, the sanctuary built by wolves the council had discarded, the Blightfang siege, the ancient magic that had saved them all. When he finished, Elder Reed stood, face purple with rage. "This is heresy. She practices forbidden magic. Those children are evidence of her corruption. The law is clear. The law is broken." Nova's voice cut through the protest like a blade through rot. "Your laws declared me worthless because I couldn't produce heirs on your schedule. Your laws allowed a traitor to poison me for years. Your laws exiled wolves whose only crime was asking questions." She stepped forward, and the floorboards beneath her feet bloomed with green moss. Your laws are killing this pack more surely than any famine. You cannot simply discard centuries of tradition. Elder Thorne slammed his staff against stone. The council exists to preserve. Nothing. Jax's interruption was quiet but absolute. Look around you, Elder. Look at your people. They're starving while you preserve laws that serve no one but yourselves. Nova raised her hand, and vines crept through the hall's windows, carrying fruit, real, ripe, impossible fruit. The earth doesn't care about your bloodlines or your hierarchies. It responds to respect, to partnership, to wolves willing to give as much as they take. She placed a pear in Elder Frost's withered hands. The old woman stared at it like a foreign object. I could feed this entire pack, Nova continued. The sanctuary has knowledge your laws tried to bury. Earth singing, cultivation techniques, healing practices that don't require dominance or submission. Her eyes swept the assembled wolves. But I won't share any of it with a council that values tradition over truth. Nash stepped beside her, their shoulders touching. I'm dissolving the High Council, effective immediately. The laws that allowed this corruption die with it. You can't, Elder Reed began. I just did. Nash's voice was iron. Colt will face trial before the entire pack for his crimes. Willow has agreed to testify in exchange for community service in the sanctuary. And the exiles, every single wolf you threw away, will be welcomed home with honor. He turned to face the gathered pack, speaking past the elders to the hollow-eyed wolves who'd suffered their failures. We're building something new. Not a hierarchy where the weak serve the strong, but a community where everyone contributes what they can, where earth singers are treasured, not feared, where a wolf's value isn't measured by their bloodline or their ability to dominate, but by their character and their willingness to build something better. Little Nash tugged on his father's sleeve. Does that mean we can stay? Nash knelt, meeting his son's amber eyes he'd almost never known. It means we're all staying. Together. Nova's hand found his shoulder, and for the first time in 5 years, Nash felt the mate bond thrumming between them. Not broken, just sleeping, waiting for him to become worthy of it. Elder Frost let the pear drop. It rolled across the floor, stopped at the feet of a starving child. The girl picked it up with trembling hands, looked at Nova with something like worship, and bit down. Juice ran down her chin. Tears followed. One by one, wolves stepped forward. Not to the council, to Nova, to the exiles, to the promise of something better than slow death wrapped in ancient pride. The old laws died that day in silence, unmourned. And from their ashes, something new began to grow. Here's the truth. Nova's story doesn't end here. It's just beginning. But whether we continue telling stories about women who were discarded and became queens, about systems that crumble when people demand better, about communities built on truth instead of tradition that depends entirely on you, this isn't a passive read. This is a choice. Comment right now with the one thing in your own life you're ready to burn down and rebuild. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their value isn't defined by someone else's labels. Prove that stories about resilience and revolution still matter, because if you scroll past without engaging, the algorithm buries this, and stories like Nova's die in the dark. Your move, make it count.